The world doesn't fear the violent. It fears the aware, because once a man wakes up, truly wakes up, he can't be ruled, bought, or distracted. His mind becomes sovereign, his spirit untamed. He sees through the illusions that keep others docile, the fake morals, the empty promises, the digital change disguised as comfort. Machiavelli warned that power was built on perception, not truth. So what happens when someone sees past the perception? He becomes a danger to every structure that depends on blindness. Society will label him arrogant, insane, even evil, not because he's wrong, but because he can no longer be used. The spiritually awake man doesn't beg for freedom. He realizes he is freedom, and that realization makes him uncontrollable. He stops worshiping systems, leaders, and trends. He becomes the system, and that's why the world isolates him, fears him, hates him, because once the mind becomes self-governing, every empire built on obedience begins to tremble. This is the law of Machiavellian spirituality. The man who conquers himself threatens the world. 1. Awareness destroys control. The awakened can't be manipulated, and that's why the system fears them. Once you see the illusion, obedience dies. Awareness is the most dangerous weapon a man can wield, because once you see, you can never unsee. Every structure of control, every illusion of choice, every rule that once governed your life starts to dissolve. The awakened mind is a rebellion in motion, not through violence, but through vision. The system survives on blindness. It doesn't need to change you physically. It only needs you distracted, scrolling, consuming, reacting. The moment you stop reacting and start observing, you step outside of its control. You become unpredictable. And unpredictability is what tyrants fear most. They want obedience, not understanding. They want you chasing comfort, not clarity. Because comfort breeds compliance, while awareness breeds rebellion. Every normal man lives inside a script written for him: school, job, debt, distraction, death. The spiritually awake man reads the script and laughs. He steps off the stage and begins to write his own. That's why the aware man feels alienated. He's not insane, he's unplugged. He sees the machinery behind the smiling faces. He sees how news shapes fear, how culture disguises control, and how comfort is weaponized to dull ambition. Awareness turns the puppet show into an education, but awareness comes with exile. Once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. The conversations that used to entertain you now bore you. The people you once admired now seem programmed. You begin to crave solitude, not because you hate the world, but because the noise of the blind becomes unbearable. And here's the Machiavellian truth. Awareness without control is chaos. It's not enough to see the illusion. You must learn to master your reaction to it. The world is full of men who see through the system, but remain slaves to their emotions. True awakening isn't rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's precision. It's understanding the strings without letting rage pull yours. The awakened man doesn't shout his truth. He moves in silence, using knowledge as leverage, not noise. He sees the manipulation in media and mirrors it to build his empire. He watches how fear controls the masses and learns to control his own fear. Awareness becomes not just survival, but strategy. The system fears awareness because it can't predict it. It can't sell to it. It can't guilt or threaten it. You stop needing permission to live. You stop being a consumer and start being a creator. That's when you step out of the herd. Most people aren't ready for that kind of vision. Awareness is heavy. It kills comfort, destroys illusions, and isolates you from the masses. But it also grants you sovereignty. Once you see the world as it is, you begin to mold it as you wish. Awareness is the first act of rebellion. It's not loud. It's not public. It happens quietly, the moment you look around and whisper, "This can't be all there is." And from that whisper, an empire is born. 2. The enlightened refuse the script. Society thrives on predictable men. But those who awaken stop playing roles. They rewrite the narrative. From the moment you were born, the script was waiting for you. Go to school. Get good grades. Get a job. Get married. Work until you're too tired to dream. Retire. Die quietly. The system doesn't need thinkers. It needs actors. Obedient performers repeating the same lines, generation after generation. Most men never question it. They follow the script like it's sacred, mistaking routine for purpose. They believe submission is maturity and conformity is peace. But the enlightened, those who see, understand that the script was never written for their success. It was written for their control. The moment you awaken, the illusion shatters. You see how deeply the narrative runs, how culture manipulates your ambition, how fear governs your decisions, how normal is just another word for tamed. You realize you were never meant to find fulfillment in this system, only function. The enlightened man refuses to function. He creates. He disrupts. He breaks the pattern and rewrites the lines. He no longer measures success by how well he fits in, but by how far he's broken away. That rebellion is spiritual, not chaotic. It's the act of reclaiming authorship over your own story. But make no mistake, the script fights back. The moment you stop reciting it, you'll feel resistance from every direction. Family, friends, co-workers, all still asleep, will question your sanity. They'll accuse you of arrogance, of coldness, of changing, and they'll be right. You are changing. That's what awakening looks like. Betrayal in the eyes of the blind. Society's greatest fear isn't rebellion, it's unpredictability. The enlightened man can't be categorized. He doesn't follow their timeline. He doesn't chase their goals. He doesn't kneel before their idols. And that's dangerous because his mere existence exposes how hollow their lives truly are. The system survives because people keep playing their roles. The worker, the follower, the nice guy, the victim, the consumer. These archetypes keep the machine running smoothly. But the enlightened man sees that the roles are just illusions of identity designed to contain potential. He no longer is anything. He becomes everything he chooses to be. That's why the enlightened are feared. They don't fit the script. They burn it. They're not loyal to the narrative of the age. They're loyal to truth, power, and purpose. When the herd says, "Be realistic," they ask, "According to whom?" When the masses say, "Play it safe," they hear, "Stay small." The Machiavellian truth is this: society can only control what it can predict. Once you stop being predictable, you become untouchable. Your detachment from the script makes you a wild variable in a world of programmed reactions. You no longer dance to their rhythm, they start adjusting to yours. But freedom is heavy. The script provided comfort, a sense of belonging. Stepping outside, it means walking into isolation. That's why few make it through. The enlightened must endure the silence of separation, the loneliness of leadership, and the constant temptation to go back to sleep. Yet in that silence you find something no role could ever give you: sovereignty. You become the author, not the actor. You write new rules, new rituals, a new identity forged from consciousness, not compliance. That's the spiritual warfare of the modern age, not between nations, but between the programmed and the awake. To awaken is to destroy your former self. It's to betray everything you were taught in exchange for everything you were meant to become. That's why enlightenment feels violent, because it tears away your masks until only truth remains. So yes, society fears the enlightened man, not because he's dangerous, but because he's free. And nothing threatens a world built on control more than a man who has stopped playing along. 3. Spirituality isn't peace, it's rebellion. True awakening isn't calm incense and yoga mats. It's the violent tearing down of every false belief that kept you tamed. Modern culture has turned spirituality into a brand, soft, safe, and marketable. It sells you calm playlists, scented candles, and yoga poses as enlightenment. It tells you that peace means avoiding chaos, that spirituality means smiling through suffering. But this is a lie. Real spirituality is not sedation, it's revolution. True awakening doesn't begin in serenity. It begins in destruction. It's the burning of illusions you once called truth. It's realizing how deeply you've been conditioned by society, by religion, by your own fears, and having the courage to dismantle every comforting lie you were raised to believe. The process is not peaceful, it's violent, because the old self doesn't die quietly. It fights to survive. The beliefs that once kept you safe will scream as you rip them from your identity. The ego will tremble as it loses its grip on who you think you are. Enlightenment is not a warm embrace, it's an execution. When the illusions fall, so do the attachments. The people who praised you for being agreeable will turn on you once you stop complying. The routines that gave you comfort will start to feel like cages. The things you used to love, entertainment, gossip, validation, will lose their flavor. You begin to see how the world feeds off distraction and dependency. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Spirituality in its purest form is rebellion against everything that keeps man enslaved to ignorance. It's the refusal to let your consciousness be dictated by external authority, whether that authority wears a crown, a collar, or a corporate logo. It's the rejection of the comfortable numbness that the modern world calls happiness. Most people want spirituality without suffering. They want awakening without annihilation. But you can't become light without first confronting the dark. You can't ascend without first dying to what you were. Every truth you discover demands a sacrifice, and the cost is always your former identity. That's why few make it through, because the journey inward is a battlefield, not a retreat. You'll confront your fears, your addictions, your vanity, your need for control. You'll be stripped bare, forced to face the raw, unfiltered truth of what you've become under society's influence. Machiavelli understood this in another form. Power is not granted, it's seized. And the same is true spiritually. Enlightenment is not a gift from the universe. It's a conquest of the self. It's you taking back control over your own mind, emotions, and destiny from the hands of systems designed to keep you compliant. The irony is that after the war comes the peace, but not the peace they sell, not the passive, smiling kind. It's a silent, unshakable peace. The peace of a man who has faced his demons and no longer bows to them. The peace of someone who no longer needs the world's approval to feel whole. The spiritual warrior does not meditate to escape the world. He meditates to conquer it from within. His stillness is not weakness, it's control. His detachment is not apathy, it's freedom. He has learned that true divinity is not about floating away from life, but mastering it fully. This is the spirituality society fears, not the docile, incense-scented kind, but the kind that births power, because a spiritually awakened man cannot be manipulated. He doesn't crave entertainment to feel alive. He doesn't need validation to feel worthy. He sees through the illusion of authority, and that makes him impossible to enslave. To awaken spiritually is to declare war on the mental chains you once called normal. It's to burn down the comforting lies and rebuild yourself from the ashes, not as a follower, but as a sovereign. So no, real spirituality isn't peace. It's the storm before peace. It's not incense and smiles, it's blood and fire, the death of illusion, and the birth of freedom. The man who walks that path doesn't come out calm. He comes out dangerous. 4. The system feeds on sleepwalkers. Governments, religions, corporations, they all profit from your unconsciousness. The awakened no longer serve, they observe. The world isn't powered by truth. It's powered by distraction. The system doesn't need to enslave you physically. It only needs to keep your mind asleep. A man who never questions what he consumes, what he believes, or what he obeys. That man is perfect fuel for the machine. From the moment you're born, you're trained to trade awareness for acceptance. You're handed a script: go to school, get a job, obey authority, seek comfort, die quietly. Every institution reinforces the same invisible order. Don't think, just follow. You're rewarded for obedience, punished for curiosity. They call it education, but it's indoctrination. They call it news, but it's narrative control. They call it freedom, but it's carefully designed captivity. Governments need you to fear. Religions need you to feel guilt. Corporations need you to feel lack. That's how the system feeds. Fear keeps you compliant. Guilt keeps you small. Lack keeps you spending. Every advertisement, every algorithm, every law, all designed to guide your attention away from your own awakening. Because a conscious mind doesn't consume blindly. It questions everything. It doesn't serve power. It sees through it. The reason the awakened are dangerous is simple. They stop playing the game. Once you wake up, the tricks stop working. You stop believing that status equals success. You stop needing validation from the herd. You stop chasing dopamine disguised as purpose. The moment you awaken, the system loses a battery. Most people think the world runs on money. It doesn't. It runs on attention. Your attention is the currency, and the architects of control know it. That's why every screen screams for it. That's why outrage trends, not wisdom. That's why comfort is addictive, and truth is buried. An awakened man begins to see that society's chaos isn't accidental. It's engineered. The confusion keeps you distracted while your energy feeds something bigger. Machiavelli understood power as manipulation of perception. Keep the masses entertained, afraid, and divided, and they'll police themselves. The modern system operates on that same principle, but far more efficiently. It doesn't need whips or chains, only screens and scrolling. It doesn't silence you. It drowns you in noise until silence feels unbearable. But the spiritually awakened man detaches. He no longer reacts. He observes. He studies the design of the trap, not as a victim, but as a strategist. He sees how fear is sold as safety, how convenience is sold as progress, how freedom is redefined to mean dependence on technology and systems that strip you of autonomy. When he wakes up, the world calls him crazy, but that's because sanity in an insane society looks like rebellion. The system mocks what it fears. It labels the conscious as conspiracy theorists, loners, difficult. Because if enough people woke up, the illusion would collapse overnight. The awakened man begins to live differently. He consumes less, creates more. He stops arguing and starts building. He refuses to trade his inner world for approval from the outer one. He walks away from endless chatter, from the news cycle, from the virtual cage of opinions, and reconnects with the only thing the system can't control, his awareness. And that's where his power returns. Awareness is sovereignty. It's the ultimate rebellion. Because when you can see the strings, the puppet show loses its magic. You begin to realize that every institution, every headline, every crisis, it's all part of the same theater designed to keep you asleep. The spiritually awakened man no longer fights the illusion directly. He rises above it. He doesn't waste energy trying to wake everyone up. He embodies awakening silently. He becomes a living example of freedom, unshaken, unbothered, untamed. Meanwhile, the sleepwalkers keep feeding the system, chasing trends, arguing about politics, worshiping idols in suits and robes. They believe they're free because the cage is comfortable. But the awakened man knows. Comfort is the most dangerous prison. He walks through the same world, but he sees it differently. He doesn't serve, he studies, he doesn't obey, he observes. The game continues, but he's no longer a piece on the board, he's the player who stepped outside of it. And that's what makes him a threat. Not because he fights the system, but because he no longer needs it. The machine can only feed on those who sleep. Once you wake up, truly wake up, you starve the beast. 5. They call you crazy to protect the lie. When you reject the herd, they label you delusional. And sanity is just clarity that threatens the collective trance. Every time a man begins to see truth for what it is, raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable, society moves quickly to destroy him. Not with swords or chains, but with words. Crazy, extremist, arrogant, delusional. Those labels are not descriptions. They are weapons. They exist to protect the illusion from those who see through it. Because when you awaken, you threaten the hive. The system is built on collective agreement. Everyone pretending the dream is real. The currency, the news, the morals, the authority, all of it only works if people believe. The moment one man stops believing, he destabilizes the spell. So, they isolate him, mock him, cancel him, turn him into a warning. See what happens when you think for yourself? Machiavelli would have smiled at this mechanism. It's psychological warfare at its finest. The rulers don't have to silence you. They simply make the masses do it for them. Society itself becomes the enforcer of conformity. Your friends, your family, your co-workers, they'll attack your awakening because it challenges the foundation of their comfort. Your clarity reminds them of their blindness. Your courage exposes their fear. The truth is, crazy is just what the asleep call the awakened. Every prophet, philosopher, and revolutionary was labeled insane in their time, not because they were wrong, but because they saw too clearly. Truth is painful. It unravels everything the average man built his life upon. Most people would rather live a pleasant lie than face a violent awakening. They'll defend their illusion like it's sacred. When you start seeing beyond appearances, when you realize the media manipulates perception, that systems are designed to drain, that morality itself has been inverted. You no longer fit in. The herd senses your difference. They can't articulate why, but they feel threatened. You don't laugh at the same jokes. You don't react to the same fears. You move differently. You see differently, and that alone makes you dangerous. You'll notice something strange. The more you speak truth, the more resistance you meet. That's because lies need consensus to survive, while truth stands alone. The herd security depends on everyone staying in the dream. When you wake up, you become a mirror, and most people can't stand to look at their own reflection. They'd rather break the mirror than confront what it shows them. That's why society worships conformity but crucifies clarity. It's easier to praise the obedient than to understand the independent. People don't want thinkers. They want followers. They want noise, not truth. Because truth demands death. The death of illusion, of ego, of comfort. But here's the paradox. Once you embrace the label of crazy, you're finally free. The opinions of the blind no longer define you. You stop defending yourself and start observing. You realize that madness and genius are often the same frequency, just misunderstood by those who can't tune into it. The spiritually awakened man doesn't argue with the herd. He outgrows it. He lets them believe what they must. He speaks when necessary, but never to convince, only to reveal. Because convincing a sleepwalker of the sunrise is pointless. They'll only call it hallucination. So you let them sleep, and you build quietly in the dawn. History remembers the madmen who refused to kneel, the ones who saw truth before the world was ready for it. Every breakthrough, every revolution, every awakening begins with one person being willing to be misunderstood. They're mocked in life, worshipped in death. That's the pattern. Society needs its martyrs of truth to evolve. So when they call you crazy, take it as confirmation. It means you've stepped beyond the boundaries of control. You've escaped the mental gravity that holds the masses down. You're no longer reacting to programming, you're reprogramming yourself. The awakened man wears the label of crazy like armor. It protects him from the noise. Because if everyone still understands you, you haven't grown far enough. Remember this, the crowd will always defend the system that enslaves them. Not out of malice, but out of fear. The unknown terrifies them more than the cage. That's why they'll fight for their captors and mock their liberators. So let them talk, let them laugh, let them call you delusional. They said the same about every mind that saw beyond the veil. You don't owe them explanation, only example. In time, the world always catches up to those it once condemned. But by then, the awakened have already moved on, too busy creating new realities to argue with the old ones. So when they call you crazy, smile. It means you're sane in a world built on lies. It means your mind is no longer food for the machine. And that's what they truly fear, a man who can see, think, and stand alone. 6. Awakening demands isolation. The awakened walk alone, not out of pride, but because few can breathe the thin air of truth. The higher you rise in awareness, the quieter it gets. At first, you think awakening will connect you to everyone, that truth will unite you with the world. But the opposite happens. The more you see, the more distance grows between you and those still sleeping. You begin to speak a language most can't understand, and suddenly, isolation isn't a choice. It's a consequence of consciousness. Machiavelli would call it the tax of perception. Those who perceive reality as it is must pay with their comfort. Because the awakened man lives in a world built on illusion, and he can no longer participate in it fully. He can't fake laughter at empty pleasures. He can't worship idols he knows are hollow. He can't kneel before systems he's seen the architecture of. His soul simply won't allow it. This isolation isn't loneliness, it's clarity. The awakened man stands at a height where the air is thin, and few have lungs strong enough to breathe there. He tries to descend and share what he's seen, but people mock him, avoid him, or fear him. So he retreats, not because he's antisocial, but because he values peace over performance. The crowd thrives on noise, constant distraction, gossip, entertainment, chaos. Silence terrifies them because it exposes their emptiness. But for the awakened, silence is sacred. It's where the soul sharpens. It's where understanding deepens. When you detach from the noise of the collective, you start hearing the whispers of truth that few ever will. The prophets, philosophers, and thinkers who shaped civilization all walked this same path. Their isolation was not punishment. It was initiation. They were being refined in solitude, stripped of illusion, hardened by silence, and prepared to stand alone against the world. The greatest men in history didn't find strength in crowds. They found it in solitude. But make no mistake, isolation isn't glamorous. It's brutal. You'll feel misunderstood, alienated, and sometimes even cursed. You'll look around and realize how few people see. Conversations will feel shallow. Social gatherings will feel like theaters. Relationships will crumble because you refuse to play roles anymore. You'll question your sanity, wondering if maybe ignorance would have been easier. That's when you must remember, this path isn't for the many. Awakening separates you from the herd because you were never meant to be part of it. You were meant to observe it, learn from it, and eventually lead, not as a ruler, but as an example of what consciousness looks like when it refuses to kneel. Isolation also tests your ego. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself that still crave validation. You'll realize how addicted you were to being seen, heard, and understood. When no one mirrors your beliefs anymore, you're left alone with the raw truth of who you are. Most men can't handle that. They run back to the crowd for comfort. But the awakened stays. He endures the silence until it becomes his fortress. There's a strange alchemy in isolation. What begins as suffering transforms into sovereignty. The loneliness that once hurt you starts to heal you. You begin to see solitude as a throne, not a cage. You become your own counsel, your own companion, your own master. You no longer seek belonging because you belong to truth. The Machiavellian mind understands this law. Whoever controls his inner world controls the outer one, and solitude is the forge where that control is built. The herd reacts. The awakened responds. The herd consumes. The awakened creates. The herd needs others to feel real. The awakened finds reality within. Once you reach this point, isolation no longer feels like exile. It feels like elevation. You see humanity for what it is, asleep, afraid, easily distracted. You stop trying to wake everyone and instead focus on embodying the awakening itself. You become the quiet storm, unseen but felt, alone but powerful. The truth is, few can breathe the thin air of awareness. It's cold, it's lonely, but it's also pure. Down below, the herd suffocates on comfort, choking on conformity. Up here, the awakened stands in stillness, unshaken by the madness of the masses. He sees everything and needs nothing. Isolation isn't the end of the road. It's the bridge between ignorance and mastery. Those who endure it without resentment become unstoppable, because once you're at peace alone, you can never be controlled again. You no longer need the approval, the company, or the permission of others to exist fully. So if you feel disconnected, distant, or out of place, good. That's the sign you're evolving. The path of awakening always narrows before it widens. Walk it in silence. Endure the air that others can't breathe. Because at the top of that lonely mountain, there's freedom waiting, the kind that only the awakened will ever understand. 7. Faith without control is dangerous. Spiritual strength makes a man uncontrollable. That's why systems preach obedience disguised as morality. Every empire knows this truth. A spiritually powerful man cannot be ruled. He may be poor, isolated, or even imprisoned, but his mind remains sovereign. And that terrifies those who crave control. That's why organized systems, religious, political, educational, spend centuries conditioning faith to serve authority, not truth. They teach obedience as virtue, submission as salvation, and guilt as guidance. They tell you to trust those in power, to follow without question, to believe without proof. But real faith, raw, unfiltered spiritual power, is rebellion in disguise. It answers to no institution. It doesn't kneel before titles, wealth, or dogma. It bows only to truth. Machiavelli would call this the paradox of religion. It must inspire enough devotion to unite the masses, but not enough freedom to awaken them. Because the moment faith becomes personal, the moment it becomes an inner fire instead of a leash, it creates men who no longer need masters. And society can't handle men like that. They don't fit. They don't obey. They don't worship idols made of gold or paper. They question everything, not to destroy belief, but to rebuild it on their own terms. They embody a kind of spiritual independence that can't be bribed, shamed, or manipulated. That's why true spiritual awakening is always demonized. Every prophet, philosopher, or mystic who refused control was labeled dangerous, heretic, or insane because they found divinity without intermediaries. The world runs on spiritual dependency. Governments sell hope. Religions sell forgiveness. Corporations sell identity. Every system profits from your belief that you are incomplete without them. They don't want you to see that the same divine energy you worship in temples or churches also lives in you. Because the moment you realize that you stop buying their narratives, you stop needing their permission to exist. And that's when you become uncontrollable. A man with spiritual strength moves differently. He doesn't beg for validation or fear rejection. He's grounded in something deeper than approval. A silent knowing that he is connected to power beyond the reach of politics, propaganda, or public opinion. Try controlling a man like that. You can't. You can punish him, exile him, or slander him, but you can't own him. His strength doesn't come from belonging. It comes from alignment. This is why the system must twist faith into fear. It teaches that questioning is sin, that rebellion is pride, that submission equals purity. It trains you to equate obedience with goodness, so even your conscience becomes a cage. You end up mistaking slavery for holiness. But real faith isn't passive, it's active. It's the ability to walk through darkness without surrendering to despair. It's the calm in chaos, the discipline in doubt, the refusal to worship anything external. Real faith doesn't make you obedient, it makes you dangerous. Because once you connect to that inner power, no ruler, priest, or ideology can dictate your spirit. You begin to see through manipulation disguised as morality. You notice how guilt is used to weaken, how shame is used to silence, how promises of salvation are used to extract obedience. You stop being emotionally blackmailed by fear. You stop worshiping systems that profit from your ignorance. You stop confusing submission for virtue. And in doing so, you reclaim what every empire has tried to steal from man: spiritual sovereignty. This kind of faith terrifies leaders. It's not loud, not violent, but it's unstoppable. It can't be censored or chained. It doesn't march, it moves quietly, reshaping reality through presence alone. A spiritually grounded man is ungovernable because he needs nothing external to sustain him. His discipline is devotion. His morality is internal. His peace is earned, not granted. The Machiavellian truth is simple. Systems can only control the faithful when faith is outsourced. Once you bring it back within, you collapse their leverage. They can no longer use heaven or hell, reward or punishment, shame or guilt, because you've found freedom in awareness. So understand this: blind faith is obedience. Conscious faith is power. One makes you a follower. The other makes you a creator. The goal is not to reject belief, it's to purify it. Strip away everything borrowed, inherited, or imposed. Burn every false doctrine that tells you to kneel in fear instead of stand in truth. Let your faith become a personal contract with reality, not a leash around your neck. When your spirit is yours alone, no system can break you. You'll walk through manipulation with a still mind, through chaos with calm, through temptation with purpose. You won't need to shout your strength. Your silence will speak for you. Because faith without control is dangerous. And that's exactly why the world needs more of it. 8. Enlightenment isn't light, it's fire. True awakening burns illusions, comfort, and weakness. The spiritually awake don't escape the world, they conquer it. Most people chase enlightenment like it's a soft glow, a peaceful state of meditation, candles, and calm. But that's a lie sold to the masses to make them harmless. Real enlightenment doesn't soothe, it scorches. It's the violent death of delusion. It's fire, not light. When you awaken, you don't float above reality. You burn through it. You start seeing every lie you ever lived by, every false belief, every illusion of control, every comforting story that kept you obedient. And that realization doesn't feel like bliss. It feels like destruction. The mind you used to identify with begins to collapse. The world you thought you knew starts to rot in front of you. Everything that once gave you meaning suddenly feels fake. That's the price of awakening, the death of innocence. You begin to understand why most people never wake up. It's easier to stay blind. Sleep is safe. Comfort is warm. But the awakened have no such luxury. Once you've seen the truth, you can never unsee it. You can't go back to living like a pawn after realizing you were built to play the board. The spiritually awake aren't at peace because they've escaped reality. They're at peace because they've mastered it. They no longer chase happiness or meaning, they build it. They don't seek light to comfort the dark. They become the fire that consumes it. And that's exactly why the system fears them. Because a man who's truly awake doesn't need to be managed. He doesn't need motivation, ideology, or leadership. He becomes self-governing. He sees through manipulation, through the false moral codes, through the emotional traps designed to control him. He sees that goodness is often a disguise for weakness, and that evil is often just power unrefined. He learns balance, not submission. Enlightenment at its core is ruthless clarity. It's the ability to see things exactly as they are, stripped of ego and illusion. And when you reach that point, you stop reacting emotionally to life. You stop craving validation. You stop mistaking peace for passivity. Because real peace is the calm that comes after chaos, not the avoidance of it. The ancient mystics knew this. They didn't seek comfort and enlightenment. They sought truth. And truth has always been dangerous. It doesn't care about your feelings, beliefs, or hopes. It exposes everything false, starting with you. The first thing enlightenment burns is your identity. Every role you play, victim, savior, follower, dies in the flames. What's left is raw awareness, silent, sharp, and utterly free. That freedom feels heavy at first because it strips away everything you thought you needed to survive. You lose the comfort of belonging, the illusion of certainty, the sweetness of denial. But what you gain is power. Not political power, not social power, spiritual power. The kind of inner gravity that bends reality around you because you no longer move like everyone else. You don't seek permission. You don't fear rejection. You've burned the need for approval in the same fire that consumed your illusions. And once you've been burned clean, the world's manipulation no longer works. You see through advertising, religion, politics, relationships, all of it. You start noticing the invisible strings that make people dance. The symbols, trends, and narratives designed to keep minds small. And instead of hating it, you learn to move within it, without being owned by it. That's the true Machiavellian form of spirituality. Not denial, but dominion. Not escaping the world, but mastering it through awareness. The false spiritual path ends with escape, running away from desire, chaos, and conflict. The real path ends with sovereignty, ruling over them. Because what's the point of enlightenment if it only makes you passive? If your light only shines in meditation but fades in war, fire isn't gentle. It purifies by destruction. Enlightenment is the same. It destroys the weak man you were, the fearful, compliant, comfort-addicted version, so the awakened one can rise from the ashes. That's why true awakening looks like madness from the outside. You'll be misunderstood, isolated, and mocked. People will say you've changed, and they'll be right. You no longer vibrate at the frequency of fear. You no longer obey invisible masters. You no longer play the emotional games that keep men enslaved. You've burned too much to ever bow again. The awakened don't escape the world. They shape it. They take the fire that destroyed them and forge something divine from the ruins. That's why the awakened are society's greatest threat, because they cannot be seduced, silenced, or scared. So if you ever feel your life burning down, don't run. Don't pray for peace. Let it burn. That's your initiation. Pain is the furnace. Chaos is the hammer. Isolation is the forge. When it's over, you won't be the same man. You'll be sharper, quieter, stronger, and when the smoke clears, you'll see it. You didn't lose yourself. You found yourself. Because enlightenment isn't light. It's fire, and the world bows to those who can withstand the burn. The greatest danger to any system isn't rebellion, it's awareness. Because rebellion can be crushed, but awareness cannot. Once a man sees, he can never unsee. Once he awakens, he becomes immune to the illusions that once ruled him. Fear, guilt, obedience, belonging. That's why the spiritually awake are the greatest threat to society. They are the mirror that exposes the lie. They no longer move with the herd. They move with purpose. They no longer crave approval. They command respect through presence alone. Every empire in history has tried to silence such men. Philosophers, mystics, rebels, visionaries. They were mocked, exiled, crucified. Yet their ideas outlived kings. Because fire cannot be killed, it can only be contained for a time. And now it's your turn. If you felt that pull, that quiet, relentless call to rise above the noise, you're not crazy. You're awakening. The world will tell you you've changed. They'll say you've grown cold, detached, distant. Let them talk. They're describing the birth of power. Stay silent. Stay sharp. Keep burning. Because when enough awake men exist, the illusion collapses and the age of control ends. Now tell me in the comments, what's one illusion you've burned through on your path of awakening? And if this message spoke to you, subscribe to join the clan of the awake. More truth is coming. More fire is on the way. Welcome to the rebellion. Welcome to awareness.